I want you to imagine the worst person that you've ever met on Wall Street. That is the Eagle Scout in Washington. Trump has a very hard time sharing credit with people. There's one light, it's a spotlight on him, there are no co-stars. When you go into politics in America, it's probably the truth here in Great Britain, the first move is character assassination. The first move is you're a flip-flopping, lying, traitorous lowlife. Trump named me to his executive transition team without even telling me. He put me on the team that Friday after the election. I called him like, what the hell are you doing? I don't want to work in Washington. So, oh no, you're going to 100% come work for me.
What did you learn from 11 days in that office, being really close to him?
I think he's going to cause irreparable damage to the country. Nobody's Trump's friend, so anybody that sits in this chair tells you they are Trump's friend, they're lying to you, or they don't know Trump, they don't know what he's really like.
Because he doesn't have friends.
Yeah, he doesn't have friends. I knew I was getting fired, okay, for a lot of different reasons, because I couldn't get anybody to call me back, particularly General Kelly. The day that I got fired from the White House and I was lit up in the press and destroyed by the American media, it was humiliating, it was brutal, it was extremely painful, but it was also, in hindsight, something that I'm very happy that I went through.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go? This is LondonReal. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Anthony Scaramucci is a fascinating man indeed. He grew up in Long Island from a blue-collar family and happened to get into Harvard Law School. He went on to create a career on Wall Street and manage billions of dollars. But you know Anthony for the 11 tumultuous days he spent in the White House before being subsequently sacked by President Trump. He became world famous for this and stayed loyal to Trump for 2 years. And Anthony said, Brian, Washington, D.C. is not a swamp. He said it's a gold-plated hot tub where you get brought bottles of Cristal and big Cuban cigars only if you can be bought. And if you can't, they come and they execute you. And that's what happened to Anthony. He couldn't be bought. He already had his own money. But he stayed loyal for Trump for the next 2 years. But in the last 3 months, he's decided he doesn't agree with Trump's policies. Trump attacked him on Twitter, his wife on Twitter. And now Anthony's to fire back and to give his own opinions of Trump's policies. He doesn't appreciate the way he talks about immigration, doesn't like what happened in Charlottesville. And I have a funny feeling we're going to be hearing from Anthony for a long time. Look, I'll be honest, he came into our studio, charmed our staff. He's a really fascinating guy. Whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, I think you really need to sit down and listen to what Anthony has to say about Washington, D.C., about politics, about Republicans, Democrats, and how they go about attacking each other and conducting politics. So sit back and relax this incredible episode with Anthony Scaramucci. This is LondonReal. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Anthony Scaramucci, the American financier, entrepreneur, and political consultant. Worth Magazine listed you in their Power 100 of top people in global finance, and Ernst Young named you Entrepreneur of the Year in New York. You famously served as White House Director of Communications for 11 tumultuous days before being publicly dismissed by President Trump. Today, you run the multi-billion-dollar global investment firm SkyBridge Capital and the SALT Conference, which brings together world's foremost thinkers and investors, including President George W. Bush, Sir Richard Branson, and Mike Tyson. Anthony, welcome to LondonReal.
Hey, it's great to be here. You forgot to mention Gordon Brown and David Cameron. They've been. And Philip Hammond.
And Will Smith, I think, too.
Yeah, Will Smith. Yeah, no, there's a whole collection of people. I founded SkyBridge. I mean, one of the great things about being the founder of your own company is that when you get your butt fired in Washington, you can go back to your own company. So,
Yeah.
But the only thing you got wrong, and thank you for the intro. I think my mother wrote that intro, so I want to say thank you. But
You're welcome.
the only thing you got wrong is that Trump didn't fire me. He can't fire people. He doesn't like that personal confrontation stuff. So he had John Kelly fire me.
Kelly do it, right.
But Kelly and I become very close friends.
Yeah, and he came to your conference, didn't he?
Came to my conference. He was with me in Abu Dhabi. I just interviewed John in Arizona as well. So yeah, we become good friends.
Well, good. And I kind of want to talk about some of the Washington stuff through the lens where you're coming from, because we both went to school in Boston. We both went on to Wall Street. I know the world of finance. I don't know anything about DC, the politics, the power games, or whatever. And I think it would be really interesting to get your perspective on it, because like you said, you still had a job. You had things you can do, which is different than a lot of people in that town, which are career politicians, right?
Well, yeah. So, I'll start out by saying that. That was my original observation. They do a bone scan of you. They look at you. It's probably true here in Westminster. They look at you. They say bought or can't be bought. And they make that analog decision very quickly. And if they think that you can't be bought, you have your own business, you're self-made, then they shoot to kill because they like people that can be bought. Because Washington is not a swamp. It's a gold-plated hot tub without a drain. And so what they do is they look at you, say, okay, that guy's willing to play the game with me. They'll give you 2 bottles of Cristal, a Cubano, and you can sit in the hot tub with them and do all of their nonsense that's led to a $23 trillion deficit and, rank income inequality throughout the society and all the nonsense that they do in Washington. But if they think that you can't be bought, they will shoot to kill, and they will keep hammering until they eject you from their system.
So everybody's
so
on the take
it's literally
there.
one of the worst places on earth. I told my Wall Street friends, I want you to imagine the worst person that you've ever met on Wall Street. That is the Eagle Scout in Washington. Okay, that is the vicar of morality in Washington.
That's hard to believe because...
Yeah, because you've met terrible people on Wall Street.
I saw nasty stuff happen on the trading floor.
Yeah, but they in Wall Street, they come at you from the front.
True.
In Washington, they'll shoot from every different direction. And there's a difference between Wall Street and Washington. It's an American expression, but it's apropos to England. In Wall Street, there's a green team. There's a money team. So you and I, we could be adversaries on Wall Street, but we're both going for the same goal to make money for each other. So therefore, it's very clarifying what our interests are and how we can transact. There's no green team in Washington. So somebody may want to sit closer to the president. Another person may want this job. Another person may have a personal vendetta, and they don't care about anything. But there's a fever that's infected the Potomac now, where it's basically about self-interest and self-preservation, and there's a lack of principles and a lack of principle standing in that, in D.C. And by the way, people say, oh, he's probably saying that because he's a sourpuss because he got fired. Could care less. I got fired. I took it like a man. I dusted myself off, and I went back to work. And I also supported the president for 2 years after I was fired. So you can't say I was a disgruntled employee.
Right.
Right.
But
look, whatever. It's a terrible place. You are better served by not serving in Washington because it's just, we don't know each other, but just looking at you and the way you run your organization, you would hate it.
Rules I'm not used to, basically.
Rules that you're not used to. You wouldn't want to do the ruthless backstabbing, amoral nonsense to ascend. You would want to be in a more meritocratic or merit-based system. You wouldn't want to be in a system like that. A patronage-based system is not for self-starters and people that start their own businesses.
Okay. Can we start briefly with kind of your background and then kind of what brought you up to that, and also just your interest in politics over the years, and then, kind of where you are now and where you want to go? Because most people don't understand you. They put you out there and think you're the guy, you're the Goldman guy, you're the hardcore Republican guy, and they're surprised when they hear about your work with gay rights. They're surprised when you hear your blue-collar backgrounds. They're surprised with that.
Yeah, listen, here's the other thing you have to do. If you go into politics, and this is a message for your viewers, if you go into politics, it's like being in a rugby match or football. I can't suit up for the Super Bowl and get hit across the secondary and get a concussion and complain about it. So I took the job. You have to expect to be attacked. You have to expect to be eviscerated, demonized, caricaturized. I'm Italian, so they can go after me stereotypically. You're dressed like the mobster, but because I'm Italian, I am the mobster, right? Seth Meyers called me a human pinky ring. If I was black, he could never call me a human piece of fried chicken. But in America, if you're Italian, I'm Jim Tan Laundry, Jersey Shore, human pinky ring. But P.S. guys, I went to Harvard Law School and my dad was a crane operator, so you can't really call me the situation from the Jersey Shore.
Right.
Whatever. I don't care. I'm just making the observation, and I'm telling you and your listeners and viewers, if you want to go into politics, what your grandmother said was true, and you should live by what your grandmother said. And my grandmother told me what other people think of me is none of my business. And so whatever people say about me, I could care less. I'm just going at it, living who I am, and let the chips fall where they may. But listen, I grew up in a blue-collar family. My dad was a member of a union. He spent 42 years as a crane operator on Long Island mining sand, which was shipped by barge to Long Island City, was mixed into concrete. And the sand mine that my dad worked at for 42 years, 65% of the concrete that created the New York City, the Manhattan-based skyscrapers came from my hometown.
Wow.
And that's where I was raised. It was a great place to grow up. It was a very good public school system. I got a great public school education. When I got into the Tufts, the standing joke in my house was my father thought it was spelled Toughs. I mean, he had no clue. Nobody in my family had gone to college. And so it was my brother and I, we were the only two people, and frankly, we're the only two people of our generation in our family that went to college.
And they wanted you to go, or
No
you
question.
wanted to go?
No, that was a big impetus. My dad was a strict disciplinarian. He went to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. I can remember my mom putting his lunch pail in the refrigerator at 9 p.m. 4:10 in the morning, he was out the door. He was home at 3:15. If you weren't at my dad's dinner table by 5:15, you got hit with something, a belt, a spoon, the back of his hand. He was very, very strict. If you had sports, he forgave you, but any other thing, you got whacked around. And you had to, before you could do anything in my house, you had to do your homework. That was my father. My father was like, you're not going to be outside where you're in direct sunlight and there's heavy lifting. He used to always say to me as a kid, I want you to have a job where you're indoors, out of direct sunlight, and there's no heavy lifting, right? He wanted a white collar life for me because he worked outside his whole life. And so I did what my parents wanted me to do. I went to Tufts, and then I was at Tufts. I read an article in Time magazine that they were paying lawyers $65,000 a year at a law firm I could have never gotten into, Cravath, Swaine and Moore. It was a white shoe firm. And I looked at that, I said, okay, my God, my dad's making $32,000 a year. I can go to law school, and after I'm done, my first year, I'll make more than my dad. That was my great thought process in going to law school. But you and I were talking before we started filming. I worked for 10 years in my uncle's motorcycle shop. And so from the age of 13 to 23, when I wasn't in school, I was selling mopeds, motorcycles, and for people here in Great Britain, they'll love this. We were a Triumph, Norton, and BSA dealer, which were all British-based bikes. And it was a tremendous life experience because we had everybody from Billy Joel, Malcolm Forbes, the Hells Angels, street gangs. I mean, it was a very wide collection of human beings. And we were a bunch of pranksters. So like if we didn't like you, right, I would have liked you, of course, Brian, but if we didn't like a person, and when they went to the men's room, we would hook a Sears Die-Hard battery with 2 cables to the doorknob. So they were trying to get out of the men's room, we would do stuff like that all day in that shop. So learned how to drive a truck there, learned how to sell in that motorcycle place. And I think my education at Ghost Motorcycles was equivalent to my education at Harvard, actually. So it gave me a lot of bandwidth.
What's it like when you get to Harvard? I mean, this is like the elite. Do you not fit into that law school?
No,
or
totally,
is it not like that?
I totally not fit in. I'm wearing it. It's Labor Day weekend, 1986. I'm wearing a black leather jacket, a Hein Garrick German motorcycle jacket, gold chains. My hair is blown back like Tony Manero, John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever.
Okay.
And I was like a fish out of water. I didn't really have a good understanding of the Harvard culture, and that's fine. Smart enough to do the work, so I did the work. This is a story you'll enjoy because you're a Wall Streeter. I go to my job interview at Goldman Sachs. I'm at the Charles Hotel, which if you remember that was in Harvard Square, and we're in a room where they're interviewing people. I'm in a polyester suit, 100% poly, a polyester shirt and a polyester tie. I am literally fully flammable for my first job interview, right? And I'm sitting there with the guy, and I'm answering all the questions, the TED spread, going into credit derivatives, net present value, and I'm answering every question. The guy says, okay, great, can I see you for a second? There was a woman in the room as well. He takes me outside. He says, you're the worst dressed person that we've ever met at the Harvard Law School. You're the worst dressed person. And I'm looking, what are you talking about? This is like my best clothing, I'm thinking, right? He goes, look, dude, you can't come to Goldman Sachs in polyester, okay? You gotta go buy yourself a suit. And I remember being mortified about that, okay? Because I was like, all right, I call my mother. Of course, she's an Italian mother. She's like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You looked amazing, okay? But I didn't look amazing. Right. I looked like a complete fish out of water, ill-styled, blue-collar kid who bought the suit off the rack from a discounted men's store. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I had to go from that upbringing where nobody had seen the inside of an office building, hit a golf ball, swung a tennis racket, to Harvard Law School to Goldman Sachs. And so you would imagine even today, a little bit rougher around the edges, a little bit less of a conformist, if you will.
But that works to your advantage, I would say. And you must have been a chameleon then to go into and pick up things at Goldman and be that guy.
Well, I got fired. I mean, so I was at Goldman for 18 months. I joined on the 14th of August, 1989. On February 1st, it was a Friday night, 1991, I got fired. The firm was in a little bit of a tailspin in the real estate department. I had worked as a real estate investment banker, and they fired me. I was the last person in and the first person out, and they handed me an $11,000 severance check, and they said, I'm sorry, you actually suck at this job, and so we're firing you. And so there I was. I had gone to Harvard Law School. I got my dream job at Goldman Sachs, and I got fired from Goldman Sachs. So I got to tell you, it was very, very rough. I mean, I was fired from the White House, but that wasn't the first time I was fired, right? So now I go home that weekend, and I build this whole networking list. There's no cell phones. I get a roll of quarters. I got to go back into New York City. I'm going to pump these quarters into the payphones and going to try to find myself a job. And I'm talking to one of my friends, and he says, hey, there's a job opening at Goldman Sachs. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, yeah, it's in the sales area, in the private banking area. And I said, okay, great. And so this is a learning lesson for people watching. If you get fired, be nice to the person firing you. Don't burn a bridge. So I picked up the phone. I called my old boss. I said, listen, would you recommend me for the other job? And he's like, yeah, I mean, you're a good guy. You probably would do that job better than the one that we gave you. And so I was fired from Goldman Sachs. They gave me an $11,000 severance check, February 1, and I was hired back at Goldman Sachs on March 28th. So the human relations woman, she calls me, she's like, Anthony, I got great news. We're never gonna have to tell anybody that you got fired, nobody here in London, nobody, but can we get the $11,000 check back? I was like, no, I've already spent the money. I was like buying real clothing and stuff like that. So I said, no way, I had school debt. And so I'm one of the few people that's been fired and rehired into Goldman, but got to keep the severance check. So, but that was a brutal period of time for me.
Okay, all right. And at the same time, you had met Barack Obama at law school.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a stretch there. We were in law school together. Okay. Michelle, I knew better than him because she was closer in, so I was class of 89. Michelle was like 88, maybe, or 87. So we had known each other. Barack Obama was 91. So even though he was older than me, he had gotten to school later. I don't remember him super well in law school, but I have a funny story. In 2007, he was in New York raising money. Many of my colleagues remembered him. And so they invited me to a fundraiser. I had a check. This was when I was very politically agnostic. And I went to the fundraiser. I went over to then Senator Obama. I said, listen, we didn't really know each other that well in law school, but I got a big check. I want to be able to lie to everybody and tell them that you and I were close friends in law school. Are you cool with that? He looks at me and says, hey, if you double the amount of the check, we'll take it right back to Hawaii. Okay, that was Barack Obama. And Barack Obama has a smile. He has the best smile in American politics since Jack Kennedy. If you're in his presence and he's smiling, he's an effervescent guy. He lights up the room. And so politically agnostic at that time. My dad was a Republican, sort of a weird fact. The unions on Long Island were controlled by Republicans, not Democrats at that time. So I was a Republican. But Barack Obama was friends with a lot of my close friends from law school. And I said to myself, well, when am I ever going to work for somebody or know somebody that's actually going to be the president of the United States? Little did I know I was going to end up with Trump. But back then, I bundled for Barack Obama.
You always fascinated with politics? I mean, was something that was always in the back of your mind?
No, I think my life story sort of bears that out because if you had asked me in law school, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. When I got into law school and I realized that there were better jobs like yourself, I saw the movie Wall Street, that was our genre, and I saw there were better jobs in investment banking and higher paying jobs and perhaps more interesting jobs for somebody like me. I gravitated in that area. But if you had asked me, my dad had worked with his hands. And so from the age of 11, my dream in life was to have my own business. And so you said to me, graduation day from law school, I would have said to you, well, I'm going to probably be a lawyer, or it turns out I got the job at Goldman Sachs, so I'm going to do that for a little while. I'm going to start my own business and be in my own business. I got into politics very accidentally because I had no network. So you have to imagine I'm a 25-year-old kid, a graduate from Harvard, but I'm coming from a blue-collar neighborhood, so I don't really know a lot of people, and I now got to build a network. And remember, I was fired from Goldman on the banking side, but hired into private wealth. So now I have to attract wealthy clients to Goldman's wealth management practice. Yeah. So I went into politics. My first check was to Rudolph Giuliani. It was a $250 check. He was running for mayor. He lost that race. We can talk about the mayor today, but back then, he's 45. He was a hard-charging, crime-fighting sort of a guy. Yeah. And I built a great relationship. We had an Italian-American heritage together, and I built a great relationship with him. He introduced me to George Pataki, who became the governor. Yeah. And so I was in the political arena as a direct result of trying to build relationships to help me in business. I wasn't in the political arena like a political aficionado where I was steeped in politics or ready to write the Veep or House of Cards screenplay. That wasn't me.
But you enjoyed it and being around powerful people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no question. Okay. I did enjoy it. The whole Trump thing was very accidental because remember, I was with Jeb Bush. Jeb comes out of the race. Trump is calling me to recruit me to help him. Him and I had a good relationship. Nobody's Trump's friend. So anybody that sits in this chair tells you they are Trump's friend, they're lying to you, or they don't know Trump. They don't know what he's really like.
Because he doesn't have friends.
Yeah, he doesn't have friends. So he's not a friendly guy. He's a me, myself guy. And so therefore, everybody in his field of vision is dispatchable and transactional. So
you had been supporting Democrats, Obama, Hillary.
I supported. That's a little bit of. A lot of this stuff gets mischaracterized. Okay. I gave a $2,000 check in 2000 to Hillary Clinton when she came out of the White House to run for the New York Senate, and I did that because one of my clients called me, and they said, "Hey, the First Lady's a close personal friend of mine, and I need you to give me a fundraising check for her." It wasn't like I was quote unquote supporting her, but what happens is when I got the job, and there's a full-on pile-on. When you go into politics in America, it's probably the truth here in Great Britain, the first move is character assassination. The first move is you're a flip-flopping, lying, traitorous lowlife. Okay, so they want to characterize you a certain way. So I get the job, all of a sudden I'm a Obama supporter, totally true, and I'm a Hillary Clinton supporter, true, because I wrote her a check, but I didn't even know her.
I mean, Trump wrote her checks as well, right?
Well, Trump wrote her a check. He wrote Schumer a check. Right. So just think about it. I'm in business, so I had written Republican and Democratic checks for friends and clients. You see what I mean? I was very politically agnostic, which is more evidence that my political foray was very accidental. So he wins the goddamn presidency, okay, which none of us thought. If you get somebody in this chair that worked on that campaign that said that they knew he was going to win, they're revising history. Okay, I was there. Trump didn't think he was going to win. Nobody, particularly that night, none of us thought that he was going to win. So he wins the presidency, and then he wants me to go work for him. And I was hosting Wall Street Week in New York. I had my business, SkyBridge Capital, which I founded in 2005. And I had my marriage, and my wife dislikes him. She doesn't like him. She has a lot of anecdotal reasons not to like him, mostly from people that she's friends with that associate with him. I'll let you decide and figure out who those people are. Okay. But she really dislikes him. She was like, no way, you can't go work for this guy. He's a destructive guy. He's going to hurt you, hurt our family. So did I listen to that? No, because I'm stupid, as I didn't listen to that.
And you're seduced by The Office.
And I am seduced by The Office. So this is a very human story. This is a story of human weakness, and this is a story about be careful with your cognitive biases, because I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. When I was campaigning with Trump, he was talking to blue-collar people, and I really thought that we were going to advance the interests of blue-collar people. We were going to figure out a way to even out the education system and to create more opportunity in the society. And so, you know, I got seduced.
Okay.
I looked at the situation. I said, wow, I'm going to go serve the American president. I'm going to help people like the ones I grew up with.
But who wouldn't take a job at the White House if offered?
That's very fair of you, but in hindsight, it was a colossal mistake for me because, you know, he's not the right guy to work for. And trust me, anybody that is going to come out of that White House, and I wrote an article in the Washington Post, which I can send to you, called Trump Employment Syndrome. So you start out disliking him, which I did. I was with Jeb Bush. Then you hold your nose and you try to figure out a way to like him. Then you realize he's a lowlife, and so you can't really like him. And so you end up where I am right now, which is in stage 3, where you're remorseful and you're admitting that you were working for a lowlife, right? So now Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo and Larry Kudlow, they're all up here holding their nose, morally equivocating, tremendous cognitive dissonance to try to pretend that they like him, right? But they don't like him. They hate the guy's.
Same thing happened with a pimp, where at first you don't like him, and then you're like, I'm going to go along with him because he seems to be making things happen, and then you realize he just treated me horrible, and it's bad news.
Okay, so you get it.
Is that a bad analogy?
It's a bad analogy in some ways, but it's a perfect analogy in other ways. You know, look, I made that mistake. I like talking about it because I think it's very important for people. Same way I like talking about being fired. I mean, what I tell my kids who are growing up very differently than me, because we've generated some level of wealth and they have some level of privilege relative to me, I like telling them these stories. I like putting things into context so people can actually see it. And if there's a blue-collar kid watching your show, I want them to know that you can have all those vagaries of life. You can have some self-consciousness. You can have some vulnerability. You can have some mistakes that you make, by some of them accidental, some of them just bad planning or bad strategy, and some of them, in the case of working for Trump, are very human. You know, I was totally seduced by it. And I'll tell you this story. People don't remember this part of the story. Trump named me to his executive transition team without even telling me. He put me on the team that Friday after the election. I called him like, what the hell are you doing? I don't want to work in Washington. He said, oh no, you're going to 100% come work for me.
And you had been helping him campaign.
I did. I helped
him raise money
100%.
for like the 6 months before.
6 months before, but I didn't want to work in Washington. So now I automatically become the accidental adversary to Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. All the while, I'm thinking they're my friends. Okay, but Harry Truman had a great line about Washington. If you want a friend in Washington, buy a dog. Even the dogs are biting in Washington. So now I think these guys are my friends, but they're not my friends. Trump and I have a casual, direct, New York, somewhat bombastic, melodramatic relationship.
Right. You can criticize each other and make up.
Beat the shit out of each other.
Because in 2015 you had said...
Are you allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
That was the first curse I've ever said, actually, my whole life.
Because in 2015 you had publicly come out and said, this guy's a goofball, or whatever.
Well, that's what I said. See, stage 1, you hate the guy, blasting him, okay? Because he blasted me. So I'm blasting him. So he's calling me on the phone. He's like, what the hell are you doing? Jesus Christ. I said, what am I doing? You started the thing. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, let's tone it down. Okay. So we start out disliking him. Then you hold your nose and like him. And then you're back to disliking him. Trust me, when this whole thing is over, whether he wins again or he doesn't win again, the people that are working for them, they're going to go through post-traumatic Trump syndrome. It's like being at war, post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yeah.
You're traumatized by this guy because he acts like a jackass.
And you're living that still.
I'm way better at it now than I was. I mean, there's still people that have left that administration that are not expressing as openly as I am the trauma of what happened. Okay. Yeah, so I'm way ahead of my peer group. A lot of my peers are still sulking and miserable and whining quietly, I'm whining more out in the open. Okay, so it's a little bit easier.
And you're giving them advice via Twitter from the other side, saying,
of course.
Guys, this is what's coming up.
Yeah, go
In 2016,
ahead.
you took Air Force One, I think, with Trump to Albuquerque for one of the rallies. And I think you told a story where you got out and decided to just walk through the crowds.
Yeah, so it wasn't Air Force One. Remember, because 2016 we were campaigning. It was the Trump plane.
Of course, yeah.
But it was something I will never forget because another admission. You go from a blue-collar family to Harvard, Goldman, and then your own business. You're in the salons of the wealthy, and you're talking to wealthy people, and whether you like it or not, you're picking up the cognitive biases of the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And this is another confession, but I think it's an important one. I started to lose touch with the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so when I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I saw the crowds, I couldn't believe the crowds that Trump was generating. And so I crossed the security perimeter, I went into the crowd, and I started talking to people about their lives and why they were here, what brought you to the Trump rally. And I had an epiphany. It dawned on me that he was talking to the people I grew up with. And those people in 35 years, Brian, they went from aspirational working class families, which was the family I was in, to desperational working class families, economically desperational. And I felt their angst. One guy said to me, I'll never forget this, he's like, hey, you think you're in New Mexico? New Mexico, that would be Mexico. Okay, because the factory that my dad and I were working in has moved to Mexico.
Right.
And I looked at him, I said, so what are you doing now? I said, I'm working at Lowe's, the home improvement center, the retail store. I'm delivering pizza for Domino's. So I've got 2 jobs, but my real income is down about 40%. And so that left a big mark on me. And I will tell you this, because I think it's apropos to Great Britain. A month after that trip, I was at the Harvard Law School Leadership Council. The dean of the Harvard Law School was hosting an event in New York. She comes in, it's the day after the Brexit. And she says, geez, I met with the Prime Minister. I met with George Osborne. I met with a whole selection of Harvard alums at law firms in the city of London. And they told me that there wasn't going to be a Brexit, that Remain was going to be the prevailing vote. What do you think happened? So I'm like sheepishly raising my hand. And I said, Dean, let's have to ask my peers here, has anybody here been to a Donald Trump or a Bernie Sanders rally? And of course, nobody had. And I looked at them, I said, well, listen, I'm not saying this in any pedantic way. I'm just being observant. I've been to 4 Trump rallies and 1 Bernie Sanders rally. And I can tell you why they Brexited, because those are the people in the Midlands, those are the people in Manchester, those are the people in the UK Rust Belt that have felt the pressure of immigration, and they have felt their wages go down, and they feel the income gap, and they are revolting.
They don't trust anybody in London.
They don't. Yeah. But also, you know this, and I'm sophisticated enough to know this, there's a lot of robotic technology. There's a lot of Russian influence in propaganda business on social media to split and divide people. They're doing it to BAFTA right now, right? Let's fire it. The goal of those people is to fester and destroy the great institutions of the West. And so if they can do that, they can make everybody distrust everybody. So BAFTA, you don't have enough blacks or whatever you call them here, British Africans, we call them African Americans, it doesn't matter. You don't have enough of them. So therefore, let's split you guys and let's cause some dissension. In the United States, let's create a dissension between the haves and the have-nots, or the white underclass versus the black underclass, or whatever it might be. And we, unfortunately, we have leadership now that will play into that. We have very tribal-based leadership. The interesting thing about the United Kingdom and the United States, the first name of both countries is United. Yet we've accepted tribalism in these countries from a political perspective that's sowing the seeds of great division. And so we need transformative political leadership now to go out there and explain to the people that feel so angry what we can do in terms of policy solutions and what we can do to fix the problem. Okay. And Trump is not someone that's going to be able to fix that problem. He's fueling that problem.
What did you learn from 11 days in that office, being really close to him? I think you were talking to Oxford Union a couple years ago, and you said straight up, he said he's not a sociopath. He's actually a guy that's measured in his response, and behind closed doors, he's not what you think.
No, I don't think Trump is a sociopath, and I said that where he has high levels of narcissism. So the issue with him is that you've got a business here, you're delegating to your people, you're probably paying them compliments and you're paying them good salaries so they could do a great job. Trump has a very hard time sharing credit with people. There's one light, it's a spotlight on him, there are no co-stars. So that causes a lot of problems, right? Like the death knell is if Trump puts his arm on you and he says, hey, you're getting more famous than me, you're about to get dispatched from Trump's world because he doesn't like it. More than one person told me that I did a press conference on my first day, and the reviews were positive. Trump didn't like it. He is the one person that gets the spotlight. He's the one person that gets all the credit.
Is that why he surrounds himself with kind of mediocre people?
Look, there's been no, Stephanie Grisham, she's lasted, if you want to define a mooch as an 11-day time period, Stephanie's lasted 35 mooches, but I'm 1-0 on Stephanie. I've actually done a press conference. She's done no press conferences. And that's Trump. You see what I mean? So
yeah.
He's not a sociopath, but he's got this high degree of insecurity, and he has this high degree of low self-esteem that he's overcompensating for with all that bluster. And he doesn't have the confidence in himself to surround himself with A-plus people that could really help him. I mean, it's a great tragedy because if he was off Twitter, he dialed back the hate and spite and the rhetoric. He offered a cheerleading effect to the country and to the world. Instead of going after our allies and praising tyrants, he'd have a 65% approval rating. But he's not capable of doing that. And so it's one of those human Shakespearean tragedies. It's not going to end well. Let's just put it that way.
But it is working out for him right now.
Well, we'll talk about it. Okay. But let me just see. Here are the three things I learned.
Yeah, what'd you learn in those 11 days?
Power. People go crazy when they have power. You got to be very, very careful. If you don't have a grounding wire, whether it's your religion, your perspective on life, or just a self-awareness, and you have some understanding that you need to stay humble in life, the power can drive you crazy, okay? And you see 3 or 4 of those guys that are manifesting that. Second thing I learned, people will do anything to be in the presence of power. Okay, they could hate Trump's guts, but they will shape-shift themselves. Think of like Lindsey Graham, okay? Started out hating him, now he's up in stage 2, and he's shape-shifting himself in order to be one of Trump's acolytes, right? So it's sort of repulsive and disgusting, okay?
Why is that? Is it just intoxicating? Or are they thinking about, are they even measuring the benefits, or is it just intoxicating to be around that power?
I think it's survivorship for him. He doesn't want to get primaried in South Carolina, and he wants to win re-election. He wants to keep hold of power. You have all that, like I said, moral equivocation that goes on. You're trying to justify Trump's antics, which are, racially divisive, and all the stupidity of Trump. And you're just trying to sit there cognitively, using cognitive dissonance to make sense of it all. But the third thing, and the most important thing that I learned, is you better not take yourself or it too seriously. Because what do we know about our lives? Our lives are short-lived, they're ephemeral. Mel Brooks has the best line ever about human life. He says, relax, none of us are getting out of here alive. Okay, it's a great line. The day that I got fired from the White House and I was lit up in the press and destroyed by the American media, I remembered that line. Relax, none of us are getting out of here alive. And so if you're going to take yourself super seriously, you're going to drive yourself and your family crazy. And so for me, I dusted myself off. My wife
it hurt?
it was extraordinarily humiliating. It was extraordinarily painful. It hurt tremendously. Look, I'm not one to sugarcoat things. I would rather tell you the truth because there's going to be a lasting record of it. And by the way, your viewers, the reason why they like you is because you're telling the truth. And your viewers know right away when you got somebody in this seat that's making shit up, then they know, okay, why do I want to listen to that? That's a bunch of garbage. So it was humiliating. It was brutal. It was extremely painful. But it was also, in hindsight, something that I'm very happy that I went through because it made me more psychologically minded. It changed me as a person. It made me a lot more grounded. It gave me a lot more perspective. And my first call, frankly, was to my wife who had filed for a divorce on me. because I loved her. I know she loved me, and we were fighting over Trump and some personal things.
But I mean, this is all happening while you're in office.
Yeah.
She's filed a divorce. She's also having a baby, I think, while you're in office.
Well, she's having a baby, and then someone said that I said it wasn't my baby, which is, again, total bullshit. That's all of that Washington stuff. I knew it was my baby. It was ridiculous.
And yet you're keeping it together.
Well, we were killing each other.
Yeah, I know.
So
but
we
I mean,
almost got divorced.
But you're personally keeping it together to try to be the face of this new office in the White House.
Oh yeah. Well, look, you got to compart. Listen, let me tell you something. When you grow up in a stressful family environment, you learn to compartmentalize, and so I had to do that. But here's the thing: I'm fired from the White House. My first call to my wife. Let's see if we can reconcile this thing. And so we began that process of reconciliation after I had left the White House. And we had some painful things that we both had to go through. But I would tell you right now, knock on wood, I'll use my head because I think it's the only piece of wood close to me, we're better today than we were then. And so that I'm very grateful for. And also, when you're having that car crash of experience, the things that people take for granted in their lives that are their blessings. I don't know if you saw It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, the movie. So he bumps his head on the bridge, and he goes into this alternative universe, and he realizes, wait a minute, I just want to get my life back. I don't want to be in this alternative universe. And he's praying to his guardian angel, get me my life back. And then he comes back to his life with this greater sense of appreciation for the tiny things in his life and for the blessings in his life. And so, listen, it was very, very painful. But I wouldn't be meeting you. I wouldn't have a personal friendship with Bill Maher. I wouldn't, I've been on the Stephen Colbert show. I wouldn't have, I don't think I would get the audiences that I can get public speaking had I not gone through that experience. So in many ways, it was beneficial, but in a lot of ways it was extremely painful. And I'm willing to admit to you that it was a colossal mistake. Ultimately, I should have stayed in the lane that I was in, which was a pretty good lane.
Right. But Trump,
so I'm happy to be back in that lane, frankly.
Right. Okay. And Trump brought you in to try to plug the leaks, and you had everybody gunning for you. And then at the end, the New Yorker article came out where it was just expletive-laden.
Yeah, well, I said,
Is that because you were stressed at the time and angry?
No, I mean, let me tell you about that, because I think this is important for your viewers. Here's what I would say. Don't let your pride and your ego get in the way of your decision making. I think it's a number one thing. And so what happened to me was in December, Trump told me that he wanted me to be his OPL director. You can go back and look at it. I was named the OPL director on January 12th, officially, 2017.
What's OPL?
Okay, that's the Office of Public Liaison. I was effectively going to be his chief networking officer. I hired Andrew Giuliani. He's still working in the White House. He was going to work underneath me in that office, building relationships for the president. That was Valerie Jarrett's old job for Barack Obama. But Priebus and Bannon did not want me to have that job. And so they were hammering me very, very hard. I didn't realize that they were my adversaries until they put the knives in my back. And so I called Trump and I said, okay, because they blocked me from getting that job. They made up some stories and blah, blah. So I called Trump. I said, these guys are bad guys. What they're saying about me is totally untrue. Of course, it came out that it wasn't true. And I said, someday you're going to want to get rid of those two guys. When you do, give me a call.
Okay.
Now, that was a fatal mistake. I mean, I've made many, many mistakes, but I got that at the top of the pyramid of my life mistakes. Why? Because I had my pride involved. I had my ego involved. They went after me, Brian, so I had to go after them. You see what I mean?
Right, yeah. You wanted some payback.
Very big mistake. So now Trump's calling me. It's July 20th. He installs me in the job on July 21st. I am now amped up.
Does he want you to get rid of him, or does he just want to mix it up, or does he just want to do something?
No, 100%. No, he was like, in the first meeting in the Oval Office, he turned to Priebus and he said, hey, he's reporting me. Anthony's reporting directly to me. I don't want him tainted by your filth. It's literally what he said in the Oval Office.
He says that to Priebus, but he doesn't fire him, but he says that to him.
He says because he's not
needs him.
Well, he's not confrontational. See, Trump wanted him to resign.
Okay,
so he told me, get him out of here, get Bannon out of here. I said, okay, let me work on it.
And the leaks are happening as we're driving everybody crazy.
Driving them crazy. Remember, it was a very intense time. Yeah. It's dysfunctional now, but it was really dysfunctional then. So, and by the way, Bannon and Priebus were like the two major leakers. I mean, they were leaking to everybody. And so I was working on those two, but I had too much emotion. Okay, and so what happens to you when you're emotionally charged and your ego's in it, your emotions are going up and your intelligence is going down. And so I had my guard down. It was a Long Island native. This guy's father, I don't like mentioning the guy's name, so I'm not, but this guy's father worked with my dad. And we had a family relationship with his family for 50 years.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website, LondonReal.tv, or click the link in the description below.